The night was thick with rain. Alina tried to reason with them. Bullies knocked her to the ground and fled into the night, piecing together a timeline. Armed with this new information, Detective Marlo intensified his focus on Layla and her connections. His usual air of confidence. The true test of courage and resilience begins. The eerie stillness of the night gripped Evergreen Academy, casting a veil of unease over the campus. Alina, Mira, and Nora felt the oppressive atmosphere closing in on them. The whispers among the students had grown louder. Rumors of ghostly figures appearing at night, strange noises echoing through empty corridors, and the ever-present feeling of being watched. It was clear that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface. Bella and Tessa, ever the investigators, discovered an ancient, dusty map hidden in the school's library. The map depicted a series of secret tunnels and hidden rooms beneath the academy, long forgotten by most. Determined to uncover the truth, the group of friends decided to explore these hidden passages, hoping to find answers to the mysterious events that had been plaguing the school. As they ventured into the labyrinthine tunnels, the air grew colder and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and turning in unnatural ways. The further they went, the more the walls seemed to close in around them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors. Finally, they emerged into a chamber that seemed frozen in time. Dust-covered artifacts lined the walls, and ancient books lay scattered across the floor. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an old, leather-bound tome. Alina reached out with trembling hands and opened the book, revealing pages filled with cryptic symbols and ominous warnings. The tome spoke of a dark chapter in Evergreen Academy's history, a time when a secret society wielded power and influence behind the scenes. The society had conducted rituals in hidden chambers, using dark magic to control the school and its students. The whispers in the night were the voices of those who had been wronged, seeking justice and revenge. As they delved deeper into the book's pages, they uncovered a plot that spanned generations. A conspiracy carefully orchestrated to keep the truth hidden. The shadows they had sensed were not just figments of their imagination. They were the remnants of the dark magic that still lingered within the school's walls. While the girls were deep in the hidden chamber, Detective Marlo was hard at work, combing through old records at the local police station. Evergreen Academy had always struck him as a place with too many secrets, and the recent strange events only fueled his suspicions. Determined to uncover the truth, Marlo sifted through case files that dated back decades. He noticed a disturbing pattern. Every few years, students or faculty members mysteriously disappeared, and the cases were always closed with little to no investigation. The same names kept appearing in the reports. Principal Rosewood and a shadowy figure referred to only as the benefactor. Marlo's instincts told him that this benefactor was the key to everything. He started digging deeper, contacting retired officers and anyone who might have knowledge of the old cases. One name kept coming up: Alexander Wren, a former detective who had been forced into early retirement after investigating Evergreen Academy too closely. Marlo tracked down Wren, now a recluse, living in a remote cabin. Wren was initially reluctant to talk, but Marlo's persistence paid off. Wren revealed that he had uncovered evidence of a secret society operating within the academy, a group that used dark rituals to gain power and influence. Wren had tried to expose them, but his superiors shut him down, and he was discredited. Wren handed Marlo a box of evidence he had kept hidden for years. photographs, letters, and documents pointing to a deep conspiracy within Evergreen Academy. But before Ren could explain further, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the cabin. Ren grew pale and whispered, "They're here." Before Marlo could react, the shadows in the room seemed to come alive, and Ren screamed as he was enveloped in darkness. Marlo was thrown back by an unseen force, and when he regained consciousness, Ren was gone. The cabin was in ruins, and the evidence had vanished. Shaken but undeterred, Marlo knew he had to return to Evergreen Academy. He was more convinced than ever that the school was the epicenter of something dark and dangerous, something that had already claimed too many lives. Back at Evergreen Academy, Alina, Mira, Nora, Bella, and Tessa continued their exploration of the hidden chamber. They uncovered more books and artifacts, each more disturbing than the last. One book detailed the creation of a powerful relic, a key that could unlock the true potential of the dark magic that still lingered within the school. The girls realized that this key was the same one they had discovered earlier, the one they had been warned about. But they didn't have time to dwell on this revelation, as the shadows in the chamber began to stir once more. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the whispers grew deafening. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, the chamber door burst open and Detective Marlo appeared, battered but determined. He had barely made it out of Ren's cabin alive, but he had come straight to the school, knowing that the girls were in danger. Marlo quickly assessed the situation and realized that they were dealing with forces beyond their understanding. He instructed the girls to leave the chamber immediately, but it was too late. The shadows surged forward, taking on the form of a twisted, monstrous figure. The figure's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have gone too far. The secrets of Evergreen Academy are not for you to uncover. Leave now, or suffer the consequences." Marlo stood his ground, drawing his weapon, but the figure merely laughed. "You cannot stop what is already in motion. The darkness will consume you all." With no other options, Marlo and the girls fled the chamber, but the shadows pursued them through the narrow passageways. They barely made it back to the surface, gasping for air and shaken by what they had just experienced. The next day, Marlo met with Principal Rosewood, demanding answers. But Rosewood, now fully aware of the danger, revealed that she had been investigating the dark history of the school for years, trying to protect the students from the shadows that lurked within its walls. Rosewood explained that the secret society was still active, and they were growing bolder. The key that Alina and her friends had found was the only thing that could stop them, but it came with a price. To use it would require a great sacrifice, one that could cost them everything. Marlo and the girls realized that they were in way over their heads. The more they learned, the more dangerous their situation became. But they couldn't back down now. The fate of Evergreen Academy, and perhaps even the world, rested on their shoulders. As they prepared for the final confrontation, strange occurrences continued to plague the school. Students reported seeing ghostly apparitions, and the whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls at all hours. The atmosphere at the academy was charged with tension, and everyone could feel that something terrible was about to happen. As the full moon approached, the secret society made their move. They planned to use the power of the key to complete a ritual that would bind the dark forces to their will, giving them control over the entire academy and beyond. Marlo, Alina, Mira, Nora, Bella, Tessa, and Principal Rosewood devised a plan to stop the ritual. They knew it would be dangerous, but they had no other choice. Armed with the knowledge they had gathered, they descended into the depths of the school one final time, determined to put an end to the darkness once and for all. But as they reached the ritual chamber, they realized they were too late. The secret society had already begun the ritual, and the room was filled with an eerie light as the shadows danced around them. The leader of the society, a figure cloaked in darkness, stood at the center of the room, holding the key. With a twisted smile, the leader began to chant, and the shadows surged forward. The girls and Marlo fought back with everything they had, but it wasn't enough. The shadows were too strong, and they were slowly being overwhelmed. Just as all hope seemed lost, Principal Rosewood stepped forward. Her eyes filled with determination. She took the key from the leader, and with a look of resolve, began to recite an ancient incantation she had found in the tome. The shadows recoiled as the incantation took effect, and the room was filled with a blinding light. The leader of the society screamed in rage as the power they had sought to control was turned against them. But the victory came at a cost. As the light faded, Rosewood collapsed, her energy drained. The shadows had been banished, and the ritual had been stopped. But the school had paid a terrible price. The morning after the ritual, Evergreen Academy was eerily quiet. The students and faculty were in shock, trying to process what had happened. The secret society had been exposed, but many questions remained unanswered. The school was damaged, both physically and spiritually, and it was clear that things would never be the same. Detective Marlo, bruised but alive, stood in the ruins of the ritual chamber. The evidence of the society's dark deeds was gone, but he knew the truth. As he surveyed the scene, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The girls gathered together, their bond stronger than ever after everything they had been through. They had saved the school, but at a great cost. As they left the chamber, the air around them seemed lighter, but the whispers had not entirely faded. Just as they were about to leave the school grounds, a figure appeared in the shadows. Someone they had never seen before, but who seemed eerily familiar. The figure smiled cryptically and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only a cryptic message. This is only the beginning. The discovery of the secret society's ritual chamber left Evergreen Academy reeling. The school was in a state of disarray, and the students were shaken by the events of the previous night. Alina, Mira, Nora, Bella, and Tessa were still processing what had happened. They knew that although the immediate threat had been averted, the dark forces that had haunted Evergreen Academy were far from vanquished. Detective Marlo, now more invested in the case than ever, decided to dig deeper into the school's history. He visited the town's archives, looking for anything that might explain the origins of the dark magic that seemed to permeate the academy. It was there that he found a collection of old diaries, letters, and newspaper clippings, all pointing to a mysterious figure who had once been a student at Evergreen Academy, Lucienne Crowley. Lucienne Crowley had been expelled from the school in the late 1800s for practicing dark rituals. His expulsion had been the result of a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances, all of which had been linked to him. Crowley had vanished after leaving the school, but rumors persisted that he had continued his dark practices elsewhere. Marlo couldn't shake the feeling that Crowley was somehow connected to the events at Evergreen Academy. He shared his findings with the girls, and they agreed that they needed to learn more about Crowley and his ties to the school. Their investigation led them to a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town, where they found Crowley's grave. However, something was off. The grave was empty. As the days passed, the atmosphere at Evergreen Academy grew increasingly tense. Strange occurrences became more frequent, and students reported seeing ghostly apparitions in the hallways. The shadows that had once seemed confined to the dark corners of the school now seemed to be everywhere. The girls began to notice that the hauntings seemed to be centered around certain areas of the school: the old chapel, the abandoned dormitory, and the library. They decided to split up and investigate each of these locations, hoping to uncover the source of the disturbances. Alina and Mira went to the chapel, where they found old, weathered prayer books and a hidden compartment in the altar. Inside the compartment was a collection of letters written by Lucian Crowley. The letters detailed his obsession with the dark arts and his belief that he could achieve immortality through his rituals. Nora and Bella explored the abandoned dormitory, where they discovered a hidden room behind a false wall. The room was filled with strange symbols and drawings, as well as a book that seemed to be a journal kept by Crowley during his time at the school. The journal described his experiments with dark magic and his attempts to summon otherworldly entities. Tessa went to the library, where she found an old dusty tome that had been hidden behind a row of books. The tome was a grimoire filled with spells and incantations that Crowley had used in his rituals. It also contained instructions for a ritual that could potentially reverse the effects of the dark magic that had taken hold of the school. As they pieced together the clues they had found, the girls realized that Crowley's influence was still present at Evergreen Academy. The dark magic he had unleashed over a century ago had never been fully contained, and it was now threatening to consume the school once again. Detective Marlo, meanwhile, was investigating the current staff and students, looking for anyone who might be involved in the recent events. His suspicions fell on a few teachers who had been at the school for many years, particularly those who had shown an unusual interest in the occult. One night, Marlo decided to confront one of the teachers, Professor Whitlock, who had been teaching at Evergreen Academy for over 30 years. Whitlock was known for his eccentric behavior and his collection of rare, ancient books on dark magic. Marlo believed that Whitlock might have been influenced by Crowley's teachings and was possibly continuing his work. When Marlo confronted Whitlock in his office, the professor was surprisingly candid. He admitted to having studied Crowley's work, but insisted that he was only interested in it from an academic perspective. However, as the conversation continued, Marlo noticed that Whitlock's demeanor became increasingly agitated. He began to mutter incoherently and seemed to be struggling with something within himself. Suddenly, Whitlock's eyes glazed over, and he attacked Marlo with a ferocity that was completely out of character. Marlo managed to subdue him, but not before Whitlock uttered a chilling warning. "The darkness is awakening. You cannot stop it." Whitlock's warning haunted Marlo, and he knew that time was running out. The dark forces at Evergreen Academy were growing stronger, and the school was becoming a battleground between the living and the dead. The girls, now fully aware of the danger they were in, decided to take matters into their own hands. They gathered all the information they had collected: Crowley's letters, the journal, the grimoire, and began to formulate a plan to stop the dark magic from spreading. The grimoire contained a ritual that could potentially banish the dark forces once and for all, but it required a great deal of preparation and a willingness to face unimaginable dangers. As they prepared for the ritual, they began to notice that the hauntings were becoming more intense. the apparitions were no longer just fleeting glimpses. They were becoming more solid, more real. The shadows seemed to have a life of their own, moving and shifting as if they were watching and waiting. One night, as they were preparing for the ritual, the school was plunged into darkness. The power went out, and the only light came from the flickering candles they had lit around the ritual circle. The air grew cold, and the sound of distant, ghostly whispers filled the room. With no other options, the girls began the ritual, using the instructions they had found in the grimoire. They chanted the incantations, burned the sacred herbs, and drew the symbols of protection on the floor. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and they could feel the presence of the dark forces gathering around them. As they continued the ritual, the room grew colder, and the shadows began to move, converging on the circle. The girls could feel the darkness pressing in on them, but they held their ground, determined to see the ritual through to the end. Suddenly, the candles were extinguished, and the room was plunged into darkness. The shadows surged forward, and the girls could feel the cold, clammy hands of the apparitions grabbing at them. They fought back with everything they had, reciting the incantations louder and faster, hoping to drive the dark forces away. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a blinding light filled the room. The shadows recoiled, and the apparitions let out unearthly screams before vanishing into the darkness. The girls, exhausted and terrified, collapsed to the floor as the light faded. When the girls awoke, they found themselves lying on the floor of the ritual chamber. The candles had been relit, and the room was filled with a warm, comforting light. The shadows were gone, and the oppressive feeling that had hung over the school seemed to have lifted. But their victory came at a cost. The ritual had taken a toll on them, both physically and emotionally. They were exhausted, and they knew that the battle was far from over. The dark forces had been driven back, but they were still out there, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Detective Marlo, who had been searching the school for the girls, finally found them in the ritual chamber. He was relieved to see that they were safe, but was also deeply concerned by what they had done. He warned them that they were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding, and that they needed to be extremely careful. Marlo also revealed that he had discovered more information about Lucian Crowley. It turned out that Crowley had not only been a student at Evergreen Academy, but had also been a member of the secret society that had conducted the dark rituals. The society had been disbanded after Crowley's expulsion, but its members had continued to practice in secret, passing down their knowledge through the generations. As the girls and Marlo continued to investigate, they uncovered more about the secret society and its mysterious leader, known only as the Benefactor. The Benefactor had been the one who had introduced Crowley to the dark arts and had guided him in his rituals. But who was the Benefactor, and why had they chosen Crowley? Their investigation led them to an old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, a place that had once been the headquarters of the secret society. The mansion was in ruins, but the girls could sense the lingering presence of dark magic as they approached it. Inside, they found a hidden room filled with old books, artifacts, and photographs. One photograph in particular caught their attention. It was of a group of men and women, all dressed in dark robes, standing around a young Lucian Crowley. In the center of the group stood a tall, imposing figure with a hood obscuring their face. This, they realized, was the Benefactor. As they continued to explore the mansion, they found a letter addressed to Crowley from the Benefactor. The letter spoke of a great work that Crowley was destined to complete, a ritual that would grant him immortality and unlimited power. The benefactor had promised to guide Crowley every step of the way, but the letter also hinted at a terrible price that would have to be paid. One night, as the girls were discussing their findings, they were interrupted by a loud knocking at the door. When they opened it, they found a woman standing there, her face pale and her eyes filled with fear. She introduced herself as Evelyn, a former student of Evergreen Academy who had left years ago under mysterious circumstances. Evelyn explained that she had been part of a group that had tried to stop the benefactor and Crowley many years ago. They had failed, and as a result, Evelyn had been haunted by the dark forces ever since. She had left town to escape the hauntings, but they had followed her wherever she went. Now she had returned to Evergreen Academy, believing that the only way to end the curse was to confront the benefactor and destroy whatever remained of Crowley's dark legacy. She warned the girls that the benefactor was still out there, still manipulating events from the shadows. The girls decided to trust Evelyn and invited her to join them in their quest to stop the benefactor. Together, they began to piece together a plan to track down the benefactor and put an end to the dark magic that had plagued the school for so long. While searching the mansion, they found a mysterious mirror hidden behind a false wall. The mirror was ornate, with strange symbols etched into its frame. Evelyn recognized it as the Mirror of Shadows, a powerful artifact that had been used by the benefactor to communicate with otherworldly entities. The mirror had the ability to show visions of the past and future, but it also had a dark side. Those who looked into it for too long risked being drawn into the shadow world, a realm of nightmares where the darkest fears became reality. Despite the risks, the girls decided to use the mirror to try and learn more about the benefactor. They took turns looking into it, each one seeing visions of the past. Crowley performing dark rituals, the benefactor guiding him, and the secret society gathering in the mansion. But the mirror also showed them something else, a vision of the future. They saw themselves standing in a dark, fog-filled forest, surrounded by shadowy figures. In the distance, they could see the benefactor, their face still hidden by the hood, performing a ritual that would unleash a terrible power upon the world. The vision ended abruptly, leaving the girls shaken and filled with a sense of dread. They knew that they had to act quickly to stop the benefactor before the vision became a reality. Determined to prevent the dark future they had seen in the mirror, the girls and Evelyn began to hunt for the benefactor. They followed the clues they had found in the mansion, tracing the secret society's activities over the years and uncovering the identities of its members. Their investigation led them to an abandoned church on the outskirts of town, a place that had once been the site of secret rituals conducted by the society. Inside, they found more evidence of the benefactor's influence, a hidden altar, strange symbols etched into the walls, and an old dusty book that contained instructions for a powerful ritual. But as they searched the church, they realized they were not alone. They were being watched by someone or something that lurked in the shadows. The girls could feel the presence of dark forces closing in on them, and they knew they had to leave quickly. As they made their way out of the church, they were confronted by a group of hooded figures, members of the secret society who had been following them. The girls fought back, using everything they had learned about dark magic to defend themselves. Evelyn, who had been a skilled witch in her youth, joined in the fight, using her knowledge of protective spells to shield the girls. After a fierce battle, they managed to escape. But they knew that the benefactor was now aware of their intentions. The hunt was on, and the stakes had never been higher. The vision from the mirror of shadows continued to haunt the girls, and they knew that the final confrontation with the benefactor was drawing near. They decided to go to the forest they had seen in the vision, the forest of shadows, a place that was said to be cursed and filled with the malevolent spirits. The forest was dense and foreboding, with twisted trees and thick fog that obscured the path ahead. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they began to hear whispers and see shadowy figures moving just out of sight. The air grew colder, and the sense of dread became almost overwhelming. But the girls pressed on, guided by the visions they had seen in the mirror. They knew that the benefactor was somewhere in the forest, preparing to perform the ritual that would unleash the dark power they had seen. As they approached a clearing in the center of the forest, they saw a figure standing by an ancient, weathered stone altar. The figure was tall and imposing, dressed in dark robes with a hood that obscured their face. This, they knew, was the benefactor. The benefactor turned to face the girls, and as they did, the hood fell away, revealing a face that was both familiar and terrifying. It was Principal Rosewood. The revelation stunned the girls. Principal Rosewood had been the one guiding them, supporting them throughout their journey. And now they realized it had all been a facade. She had been the benefactor all along, manipulating events from the shadows. Principal Rosewood smiled coldly and began to chant in a language the girls did not understand. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and dark, swirling energy rose from the altar. The ritual was beginning. The girls knew they had to stop her, but they were no match for the dark power she wielded. Evelyn stepped forward, drawing on the last of her strength to cast a protective spell around the girls. She told them to finish the ritual they had started at the school, to use the grimoire to banish the dark forces once and for all. With Evelyn's protection, the girls began to recite the incantations from the grimoire. The dark energy around them surged, but they held their ground, pouring all their will into the ritual. Principal Rosewood, realizing what they were doing, tried to stop them, but it was too late. As the final words of the incantation were spoken, a blinding light filled the clearing. The dark energy was pulled into the light, swirling and writhing as it was banished from the world. Principal Rosewood let out a scream of rage and despair as the light consumed her, and then she was gone. The light faded, and the girls found themselves standing alone in the clearing. The altar was gone, and the forest was silent. The dark forces had been banished, and the benefactor was no more. But the victory came at a cost. Evelyn had used the last of her strength to protect the girls, and she was now fading away, her body turning to mist as she passed into the afterlife. She thanked the girls for helping her find peace and told them to live their lives free of fear. The girls returned to Evergreen Academy, where they were hailed as heroes. The school was no longer haunted, and the dark magic that had plagued it for so long was finally gone. But the girls knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced and the sacrifices they had made. With the darkness banished, Evergreen Academy began to rebuild. The school was no longer a place of fear and dread, but a place of hope and learning. The girls, now more united than ever, continued their studies, determined to use their knowledge to prevent such darkness from ever returning. Detective Marlo, who had been instrumental in helping the girls, decided to stay in town and keep a watchful eye on the school. He knew that while the immediate threat had been dealt with, there were still mysteries to be unraveled and dangers to be faced. As the school year drew to a close, the girls looked back on everything they had been through. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had also grown stronger and closer as friends. They knew that their journey was not over and that there would always be new challenges ahead. One day, as the girls were exploring the school, they came across a hidden door in one of the old, unused classrooms. The door was small and unassuming, but it had a strange symbol carved into it, a symbol they had seen before in the grimoire. Curious, they opened the door and found a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, they discovered a small hidden chamber filled with ancient books, artifacts, and scrolls. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, much of it related to the dark arts and the history of Evergreen Academy. Among the items, they found a journal that had once belonged to Lucian Crowley. The journal detailed his experiments with dark magic, but it also contained something else. A map of the school with a series of secret passages and hidden rooms. The girls realized that there was still much about the school that they did not know. The hidden chamber was just the beginning, and they knew that they would have to continue exploring if they wanted to uncover all the secrets of Evergreen Academy. As they delved deeper into the secrets of the school, the girls began to piece together the history of Evergreen Academy. They learned that the school had been founded by a group of scholars who had been dedicated to studying the occult. These scholars had amassed a vast collection of knowledge, much of which had been hidden away to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. But over the years, the school's purpose had shifted, and the dark forces that had once been studied had begun to take hold. The girls realized that the founding scholars had intended for the school to be a place of learning and protection, but somewhere along the way, that mission had been corrupted. Determined to restore the school to its original purpose, the girls began to study the texts they had found in the hidden chamber. They learned about protective spells, ancient rituals, and the history of the occult. They also discovered that there were other hidden chambers scattered throughout the school, each one containing more secrets waiting to be uncovered. As the girls continued their studies, they began to notice strange occurrences once again. Books would move on their own, shadows would flicker in the corners of their vision, and they would hear whispers in the dead of night. It was clear that while they had banished the immediate threat, there were still dark forces at work in the school. They soon discovered that not all of the secret society's members had been accounted for. Some had gone into hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike. The girls realized that they were now the guardians of the school's secrets, and it was up to them to protect it from those who would use its knowledge for evil. Detective Marlo, who had been helping the girls with their investigations, became increasingly concerned for their safety. He warned them that they were dealing with forces that were beyond their control, and that they needed to be careful. But the girls were determined. They knew that the school had been a place of darkness for too long, and they were committed to bringing it back into the light. They continued their studies, preparing themselves for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the girls delved deeper into the school's secrets, they began to uncover evidence of a new threat, a cult that had been operating in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. This cult was dedicated to reviving the dark rituals that Lucian Crowley had started, and they were determined to finish what he had begun. The girls realized that the cult had been responsible for many of the strange occurrences at the school. They had been using the hidden passages and chambers to conduct their rituals, slowly gathering power and influence. Determined to stop the cult, the girls began to track down its members. they discovered that the cult was led by a powerful and mysterious figure known only as the Shadow. Someone who had been a member of the secret society, but had gone rogue after Crowley's death. The Shadow was a master of dark magic, and they were determined to unleash the full power of the occult on the world. The girls knew that they were in over their heads, but they also knew that they had no choice but to confront the Shadow and stop the cult before it was too late. The girls and Detective Marlo prepared for the final confrontation with the Shadow and the cult. They gathered their allies, armed themselves with the knowledge they had gained, and set out to face the darkness head-on. The final battle took place in the heart of the school, in a hidden chamber that had once been used for the most powerful rituals. The cult had gathered there, preparing to perform a ritual that would unleash a terrible power upon the world. The girls and Marlo fought bravely, using everything they had learned to hold off the cult. But the Shadow was a formidable opponent, and it soon became clear that they were outmatched. In a desperate move, the girls decided to use a forbidden spell they had found in one of the ancient texts. The spell was dangerous, and they knew it could have dire consequences, but they had no other choice. As they recited the incantation, the chamber was filled with a blinding light. The spell worked, banishing the Shadow and the cult members from the school, but the cost was high. One of the girls was left gravely injured, and the school was left in ruins. The battle was over, but the consequences of the spell lingered. The school was no longer haunted by the dark forces, but something had changed. The girls could feel it, a lingering presence, an unease that they couldn't shake. But they also knew that they were stronger than before, that they had each other, and that they would face whatever came their way together. Alina sat by the window of her dorm room, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across her face. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of Layla and her father, the people who had tormented her for so long. She had been humiliated, beaten down, and made to feel powerless. But now, with everything she had discovered about Evergreen Academy's dark past, she knew she had the power to turn the tables. But how? How could she make Layla and her father pay for what they had done? Every plan she considered seemed too small, too insignificant to match the pain they had caused her. She wanted to do more than just expose their secrets. She wanted to dismantle the facade they had built, to make them feel the fear and helplessness she had endured. As these thoughts churned in her mind, there was one person she kept thinking about. Detective Marlo. He had been there for her through all the chaos, and she couldn't deny the feelings that had begun to stir in her heart. She found herself drawn to him, not just because of his strength and intelligence, but because he seemed to understand her in a way no one else did. And what was even more surprising, Marlo seemed to feel the same way. His glances lingered a little too long. His words carried an undercurrent of something deeper. There was an undeniable connection between them, a spark that neither could ignore. But as much as she was drawn to him, Alina knew that falling for Marlo would complicate things. Could she really trust him? Would he help her in her quest for revenge? Or would he try to stop her? The stakes were higher than ever, and the lines between right and wrong were blurring. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. Revenge is a dangerous game, and the pieces are in motion. Subscribe for part 3, to be continued.